Ports are some of the easiest games to make, and they tend to sell great too. That is the first sentence I ever said on this YouTube channel, all the way back almost 4 years ago now when I made top 10 ports I wanted to see on the Nintendo Switch. And everyone knows that that sentence is true. Ports are objectively easier to make and develop than actual new video games. On top of that, on the Switch at least, they sell incredibly well. I mean, the top selling game on this system is a port. However, recently, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD came out, and if any port wasn't going to sell super well, I thought it was going to be this one. I mean, there's always been a crowd angry at Nintendo for porting over old games instead of developing new ones, but that crowd seemed to be the loudest for Skyward Sword. People were pissed that they weren't adding in pretty much anything new to the game. It was retailing at $60 full, and it was seemingly the only game Nintendo was putting out for Zelda's 35th anniversary. Not a day would go by where someone wouldn't post a "Don't buy Skyward Sword HD, don't support Nintendo" tweet on Twitter. However, the game came out and it's selling phenomenally. Why is this? We all know that ports are easy to make, but why do they sell great? What's going on, guys? It's Thomas from the Switch Shop, and this is why the Nintendo Switch ports specifically sell so well. So naturally, the biggest reason is that you can now take these games on the go. This is something we take for granted as Switch users because it's kind of just always been there for us, but this is the first time you can take a lot of these games on the go. However, that's not all I'm going to talk about today because that would be the world's quickest video. The Nintendo Switch also grows the fan bases for these IP, creating a wider possible consumer pool for when the product drops. For example, let's use Skyward Sword. It's the newest port and illustrates this point really well. Before the Nintendo Switch, Zelda didn't sell particularly well. Sure, it's one of Nintendo's most premier franchises, but it very rarely sold as well as Mario or Animal Crossing or even the very new Splatoon. However, when Breath of the Wild came out and has now sold almost 25 million copies, that is a ton of people getting into The Legend of Zelda for the first time. Because of that, even though Skyward Sword is about as far away from Breath of the Wild as you can actually get in terms of gameplay, just by being on the same console that had 25 million sales of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword is bound to sell extremely well, considering how many people are new to the Legend of Zelda franchise and might want to either A, experience what happened before Breath of the Wild, experience where the franchise came from and all that, or B, they don't even care that that's just where it came from, they just want more Zelda because they just played Breath of the Wild, which is one of the best games of all time, and they're gonna want more Zelda even though Skyward Sword is not really similar to Breath of the Wild at all. You can see this happen with a ton of different games. Mario Odyssey set all sorts of records for being one of the fastest selling 3D Marios, one of the best-selling 3D Marios, and then basically 1 year later when Nintendo ports New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, tons of Mario fans are like, oh, I want more Mario on the Switch. The last game I played of that, Odyssey, was so good that I'm just gonna buy this one. On top of that, the Nintendo Switch has this very insanely bizarre effect, where it's able to convert people who maybe don't normally play Nintendo games, or hell, this could be their first video game console ever, into consumers who are buying most of these titles. This is different from a console like the Wii, which, as of right now, has still sold more than the Nintendo Switch, but most people who bought their Wii bought it, played Wii Sports and maybe Mario Kart Wii, possibly bought a few shovelware titles and maybe Wii Play or something like that, and then promptly never bought another game because they weren't gamers. They just wanted the Wii because it was a cultural phenomenon and the motion controls were very cool and revolutionary at the time. Then take a look at the Switch. The Switch has one of the highest attach rates for any console, meaning that per console sold, there is an insanely high amount of software sold. Whereas with other popular Nintendo consoles like the Wii, people love to buy the Wii. With the Switch, people love to buy the Switch and then buy Switch games. Which leads to situations like this, where Skyward Sword sold about 3 million units on the Nintendo Wii, despite the Wii having way more people who owned it than the Switch, at least as of right now. Although that number is closing very rapidly. Despite Skyward Sword on the Wii having more possible people to buy it, it being a cheaper game, and a newer game by a decade, Skyward Sword HD on the Nintendo Switch will outsell Skyward Sword on the Wii. It's just almost a given at this point. Pretty much every single port on the Switch has outsold its counterpart. Now, how is Nintendo able to cultivate that? Well, as I said so far, they're able to grow the fan bases for their IPs by releasing new games like Breath of the Wild and then porting over their titles, meaning there's a lot more potential Zelda fans to buy that game. They've somehow made it so consumers of the Switch buy more software than pretty much any other console. The Switch has appealed to non-gamers who have never played these titles on older consoles, so the fact that it's a port really doesn't mean anything to them. And last but not least, in terms of marketing, Nintendo pushes these ports as if they are new titles. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD has been everywhere recently. It's been on Twitch ads, YouTube ads, I've seen television commercials for it, Nintendo's Twitter accounts have been constantly tweeting about it. They're advertising this game as if it was a new title. And by pushing the game as a new title, and combining that with the fact that most people who have the Switch probably have not touched a Nintendo console in decades, or maybe even a video game console in decades, you have a recipe for success for Nintendo Switch ports. And that's why Nintendo keeps pumping them out. I mean, the console came out in March of 2017, it's August of 2021, we're basically 4.5 years into this console's life, and we're still getting ports from the Wii. However, I don't see this stopping anytime soon, because they just sell so well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this little bit of a chill talk. I just wanted to explain why I think ports are selling so well. Because you can always just say, oh, the Switch games always sell well, or oh, people want to play these games on the go for the first time. But that's clearly not true, because every single port is outselling its original, even for games like Skyward Sword that were on the Wii, a console that had a higher install base than the Switch. So that's how I think Nintendo has set themselves up for success with the ports. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video by commenting down below if you agree or disagree, liking and sharing the video. Subscribe if you're new. With that out of the way, I'm Thomas from the Switch Stop signing off. Peace.